The twins of the widowed millionaire were weeping with a relentless, piercing intensity until the maid whispered a secret into the desperate silence. If I do not find a solution within 48 hours, I shall be forced to commit my daughters to a psychiatric institution for children, for I can no longer endure this torment. The words of Arthur Sterling resonated throughout the cavernous expanse of the mansion like a pronouncement of doom. It is 3:47 in the morning on a bleak Tuesday, and the twins, Lily and Violet, have been crying without cessation for 6 hours straight. It is a cry that defies normality, a sound that pierces the very soul and instills a profound despair in anyone unfortunate enough to hear it. Arthur walks through the main hallway of his residence in Mayfair. At the age of 32, this successful textile entrepreneur, whose fortune exceeds £200 million sterling, appears to have aged a decade in a mere 4 months. His raven hair, usually combed with military precision, is now disheveled and greasy. His green eyes, which once radiated an unshakable confidence, now betray a desperation that is truly terrifying to behold. His twins, Lily and Violet, were born 4 months ago following a complicated birth that cost his wife, Isabella, her life. From their very first day at home, the infants have not ceased their weeping. It is not the commonplace crying of newborns who are hungry or suffering from colic. It is something deeper, more desperate, as if they were enduring a constant, agonizing pain that no living soul can identify. "Sir," whispers Mrs. Higgins. The 58-year-old housekeeper has served the Sterling family for 15 years. Her eyes are rimmed with red, swollen from fatigue and worry. The girls remain the same. I have given them their bottle. I have changed them. I have rocked them. Nothing works. Arthur runs his hands over his face in a gesture of utter exhaustion. He has spent more than £3 million sterling on the finest pediatricians, neurologists, and infant specialists in all of the United Kingdom. Doctors arrived from Manchester, from Edinburgh. They even flew in a renowned specialist from Houston, Texas. They all delivered the same verdict. The babies are physically healthy. They do not suffer from colic. They do not have reflux. They possess no medical condition that explains the ceaseless crying. "I have already summoned Dr. Harrison again," Arthur murmurs, referring to the most expensive pediatrician in London. "He is coming in the morning, but we already know what he is going to say, that they are healthy and we must simply endure." The crying intensifies from the twins' nursery. It is a sound that penetrates the marble walls and the high corniced ceilings of the Georgian mansion. The household staff have begun to resign one by one. The cook departed last week, declaring that the creatures were cursed. The gardener ceased his visits because he could no longer bear the sound of weeping drifting from the garden windows. "Sir," Mrs. Higgins says in a trembling voice, "what if we tried someone else? Perhaps someone with more experience with infants?" "We have already tried 5 different nannies," Arthur replies bitterly. "The last one lasted 3 days. She had claimed that in 30 years of child rearing, she had never witnessed such a thing." It is true, Arthur had hired the most elite nanny in the country, a woman with impeccable references who had cared for the children of royalty and captains of industry. She charged £50,000 sterling a week and fled on the 4th day, pale as a sheet, declaring that those babies needed a priest, not a lullaby. Arthur ascends the marble staircase toward the twins' room. Every step weighs upon him as though he were carrying the weight of the heavens on his shoulders. When he opens the door, the crying hits him with physical force. Lily, with her golden curls so like her mother's, is flushed crimson from the exertion. Her fists are clenched tight. Her small face is swollen. Violet, darker-haired like him, has green eyes brimming with tears. Her mouth opens in a silent scream, for she has no voice left. "My princesses," whispers Arthur, lifting Lily into his arms. The baby worsens as if his very touch causes her pain. "Daddy doesn't know what to do anymore. I am sorry I cannot help you." It is then that Mrs. Higgins appears at the door, wearing an expression of hope for the first time in weeks. "Sir, I just remembered something. My friend Dolores works at a domestic agency. She says she has a new girl, very young, but she possesses a special gift with children. She comes from a village in the Scottish Highlands." Arthur looks at her with desperation. He has lost all faith in magical solutions, yet he has nothing left to lose. A special gift? She says that children calm down with her in a different way, as if she understands their language. Hope. We have tried everything. Doctors, nannies, therapists, they even brought in a homeopath. This girl is different, sir. She comes from a family of healers. Her grandmother was a midwife and a wise woman of the hills. Maybe. I do not believe in such things, Arthur interrupts, but his voice lacks conviction. What do we lose by trying? The girls cannot be any worse off than they are. Arthur looks at his daughters. Lily has cried so much that she has tiny petechiae around her eyes from the effort. Violet is shaking with exhaustion, yet she cannot stop weeping. It is okay, he whispers finally. Let her come early tomorrow, but if it doesn't work out on the first day, she does not come back. Yes, sir, her name is Clara Thorne. She is 24 years old. That early morning, while the twins are still crying, Arthur makes a desperate decision. He calls his personal assistant. Marcus, I need you to investigate child psychiatric clinics in Switzerland. If the new girl doesn't work out, I am going to institutionalize the babies. I can't take it anymore. On the other end of the line, Marcus is silent. He has known Arthur for 10 years. I have never heard him so broken. Sir, are you sure? They are very small. Marcus, I haven't slept more than 2 hours in a row for 4 months. The babies are losing weight because they cannot feed well between crying so much. And I am starting to have dark thoughts about my own sanity. I understand, sir. I will investigate the options. When Arthur hangs up, he is standing at his office window watching the sunrise over London. In a few hours, Clara Thorne will arrive, a young woman from the Scottish Highlands with supposed gifts to calm children. It is his last hope before making the most difficult decision of his life, to separate from his daughters so that they receive professional help. What Arthur doesn't know is that Clara Thorne is not an ordinary domestic worker. She comes from an ancestral line of Scottish Gaelic women healers. Her great-grandmother was a respected wise woman. Her grandmother was a midwife who helped hundreds of children into the world. And her mother was a healer who cured ailments of the body and soul. Clara inherited something that even she herself does not fully understand: the ability to communicate with babies in a way that transcends the physical. She can feel their emotional pain, she can listen to their deepest needs, and she knows ancestral lullabies that carry in their melody the power to heal broken hearts. In her humble cottage in the Cotswolds, Clara is preparing for the most important job of her life. Little does she know that she is about to change not only the fate of 2 desperate babies, but also that of a millionaire man who has lost all hope. The twins are still crying in their mansion, not knowing that tomorrow they will meet the woman who will whisper the words they have been waiting to hear since they came into the world. The arrival of Clara. Thursday, 6:30 a.m. The doorbell of the mansion rings exactly at the agreed time. Clara Thorne is standing in front of the wrought iron main door, carrying a small cloth suitcase and a hand-woven bag that belonged to her great-grandmother. Her heart is beating fast, not because of nerves about the new job, but because since she got off the bus in Knightsbridge, she can hear something that others do not perceive: the suffering of 2 very small souls. Good morning, Mrs. Higgins says as she opens the door, evaluating with her gaze the young woman who could be the salvation of this house. Clara is 24 years old, but her face conveys a serenity that seems to come from someone much older. Her fair skin reflects her Celtic roots. Her dark eyes are deep and compassionate, and she wears her black hair up in a simple braid. Good morning, ma'am. I am Clara Thorne. Come on in, child. We have been waiting for you. The interior of the mansion impresses Clara, but does not intimidate her. She has cleaned big houses before, though none like this one. What disturbs her are the waves of pain that float in the air like an invisible mist. The stone walls and beamed ceilings look like they have absorbed months of suffering. The master is in his office. He hardly slept last night, Mrs. Higgins explains as they walk down the hallway. The girls were especially worried. Clara stops at the foot of the stairs, closes her eyes for a moment, and cocks her head as if she is listening to something that only she can perceive. Are they up there? She asks, pointing towards the second floor. Yes, how did you know that? Clara does not answer directly. I can feel their distress. It is very deep. Mrs. Higgins' skin is prickling. There is something about the way this girl speaks that is familiar to her, as if she had met women like that before in her hometown. Arthur appears on the stairs. He came downstairs when he heard voices, hoping it was another employee who would resign before noon. When he sees her, he is surprised. It is not what he expected. The other nannies were older women with impressive resumes and starched uniforms. Clara is wearing a simple blue cotton dress and leather boots, but there is something about her presence that calms even him. "Mr. Sterling," Clara says with respect, but without the exaggerated submission that he is used to receiving from employees. "Mrs. Higgins told me about your daughters. You have experience with babies that—" Arthur doesn't know how to describe the problem without sounding crazy. That cry for no apparent reason. "Yes, sir. In my hometown, in the Highlands, children are born like that sometimes. It is usually that their spirits are lost." Arthur frowns at the sign. Lost spirits? Well, babies born after a great loss sometimes bring with them the pain of those who left. It is not a medical thing, it is something deeper. Mrs. Higgins and Arthur exchange glances. It is a strange explanation, but after 4 months of failed medical theories, any different perspective deserves consideration. "And do you know how to help them?" Arthur asks, feeling a mixture of hope and skepticism. "My great-grandmother taught me special songs, very old melodies that speak directly to the heart of young children. Sometimes it works." At that moment, as if they had overheard the conversation, the twins start crying on the upper floor. It is the same desperate crying that has haunted the house for months. "Can I come up and meet them?" asks Clara. Arthur nods, following her down the stairs. When they reach the twins' room, Clara stops on the threshold. Lily is in her crib crying with an intensity that makes the bars shake. Violet is in the arms of a night nurse who seems on the verge of a nervous breakdown. "Mr. Sterling, I can't take it anymore," the nurse says in a broken voice. "I've been trying to calm them down for 12 hours and nothing is working. I've never seen anything like it." Clara enters the room with slow, deliberate steps. She approaches Lily's crib first without touching her, just observing her. Then she turns to Violet, studying her small face swollen from constant crying. "Can I carry one of them?" she asks. "Of course," replies Arthur, desperate for any intervention. Clara extends her arms toward Violet. The nurse hands her over with relief. At the moment when Clara takes the baby, something extraordinary happens. Violet does not stop crying immediately, but the tone changes. It becomes less desperate, more like the normal crying of a baby. "Hello, little one," Clara whispers in English. Then she adds something in Scottish Gaelic that the others don't understand. Clara sits on the rocking chair by the window and starts rocking Violet with a specific rhythm. Then, in a soft but clear voice, she begins to sing a melody that none of those present had heard before. They are not words in English. They don't even sound like modern Gaelic. It is something older, more primitive, as if it were the original language of mothers. The effect is immediate and surprising. Violet gradually stops crying, her little fists relax, and for the first time in 4 months, she opens her eyes without tears and looks directly at Clara's face. "My God," the nurse whispers. But the most amazing thing is that Lily, from her crib, also starts to calm down, as if the song works even from a distance. "What are you singing to her?" asks Arthur, approaching cautiously, as if any sudden movement could break the spell. "It is a song that my great-grandmother used to sing to babies who were born sad," Clara explains, still rocking. She talks about finding the way back to peace, about remembering that they are safe, that they are not alone. Violet closes her eyes, and for the first time since she was born, she really falls asleep. It is not the restless and interrupted sleep of before, but a deep and restful rest. "I can't believe it," Arthur murmurs. Clara carefully gets up and places Violet in her crib. Then she takes Lily, who has completely stopped crying, and repeats the process. The second twin responds even faster than her sister. In 15 minutes, the 2 babies are sleeping soundly. The silence in the room is so profound that it is overwhelming after months of constant crying. "How did you do it?" Arthur asks, his voice barely a whisper. "Babies understand more than we think," Clara replies. "Violet and Lily have been trying to tell us something since they were born. They just needed someone who could speak their language." "What were they trying to say?" Clara looks at the cribs where the twins sleep peacefully. that they miss their mom, that they feel their mate's pain, that they don't understand why they came to such a sad world. The words hit Arthur like a physical blow. He has been so focused on finding a medical solution that he never considered that the babies might be reflecting his own grief. Sir, Clara says gently, they need to feel that this home has love, not just medical care. They need to hear that they are welcome, that their arrival is a blessing, not a tragedy. The night nurse picks up her things quietly, still in shock at what she has just witnessed. Before leaving, she approaches Clara. Do you really think that was it? They were sad for their mother. Babies absorb all the emotions of the environment, explains Clara. If there is deep pain in the house, they feel it and do not know how to process it, except by crying. After the nurse leaves, Arthur stands by the cribs, watching his daughters sleep for the first time in peace. Clara finally says, can you stay not only for today, but permanently? Yes, sir. These girls need me, and I think you do too. Arthur doesn't know how to respond to that. He has been so focused on being a father that he forgot to be a human being. Clara's words suggest that the problem could be more complex than any doctor had considered. Mrs. Higgins is going to show you your room, he says finally. And Clara, thank you. As they walk down the stairs, Mrs. Higgins can't contain her curiosity. My child, do you really think it will work in the long run? Clara stops and looks towards the twins' room. They're going to be fine, but there's someone else in this house that needs to heal too. Mr. Sterling's pain is as deep as that of the babies. What Clara doesn't know is that someone else has been watching everything from the shadows. Dr. Eleanor Vance arrived that morning for a scheduled consultation and witnessed the whole scene from the hallway. And what she saw filled her with a cold rage that would soon turn into something much more dangerous. Dr. Eleanor Vance, Friday 9:45 in the morning. Dr. Eleanor Vance adjusts her ivory blazer as she walks through the main lobby of the Sterling mansion. At 36 years old, Eleanor is the type of woman who dominates any room she enters. Perfectly wavy brown hair, impeccable makeup that highlights her honey-colored eyes, and a posture that screams academic authority. Her private practice in Knightsbridge is one of the most prestigious in London for child psychology, and her fees of £8,000 sterling per session reflect her elite status. Dr. Vance greets Mrs. Higgins with deference. Mr. Sterling is waiting for you in the study. Eleanor smiles, but it is a calculated smile. She has been treating the Sterling twins for 3 months, charging £32,000 sterling a week for her specialized therapies, which included early stimulation sessions, behavioral analysis, and what she called emotional healing from prenatal trauma. Of course, none of these therapies had worked, but Eleanor had a perfect explanation. The case was extraordinarily complex and required patience. What Arthur didn't know was that Eleanor had been deliberately prolonging the treatment, not because the babies were a difficult case, but because she had been in love with him since Isabella's death. As a psychologist, she understood perfectly that a man in deep mourning was vulnerable, malleable. Her plan was simple: to become indispensable during his crisis, to position herself as the only person who could save his daughters, and when he was completely dependent on her, to make her romantic move. But yesterday she heard something that filled her with an icy fury. Eleanor, thank you for coming, Arthur says when she enters the study. His appearance surprises her. For the first time in months, he doesn't seem on the verge of a nervous breakdown. His hair is combed, he's wearing a clean shirt, and most surprising of all, he's smiling. Arthur, you look different. Did you sleep last night? For the first time in 4 months. Yes, a full 8 hours. Eleanor feels an immediate alarm. The girls improved? Did the breathing technique we practiced finally work? Not exactly. Arthur sits behind his mahogany desk, gesticulating with an energy Eleanor hadn't seen since before Isabella's death. I hired a new maid, a young woman from the Scottish Highlands. She has a special gift with babies. The words fall on Eleanor like ice water. A special gift. Eleanor, in 15 minutes, she managed to do what all of us, including you, have not been able to do in months. The girls slept through the night. Eleanor forces a professional smile as her mind works at full speed. Arthur, as a psychologist, I must warn you about seemingly miraculous solutions. Sometimes children go through periods of temporary calm, that do not indicate real improvement. This was different, Eleanor. This girl, Clara, sang something to them in her ancestral language. It was as if someone had finally found the right key. Their ancestral language. Eleanor can't completely hide the disdain. I hope you're not resorting to superstitions. It's not superstition, it's a result. For the first time in months, my daughters are at peace. Eleanor feels that she is losing control of the situation. She has spent 3 months building her position as this family's only hope. She cannot let an uneducated maid destroy her plan. I would like to meet this Clara, Eleanor says, maintaining a professional tone, as the person responsible for the psychological treatment of the girls. I need to evaluate any new interventions. Of course, she's upstairs with the twins. While they are climbing the stairs, Eleanor can hear something that disturbs her deeply. Baby laughs, real, spontaneous, joyful laughter. In 3 months of treatment, she had never heard Lily and Violet laugh. When they arrive at the girls' room, Eleanor sees a scene that fills her with rage. Clara is sitting on the floor on a hand-knitted blanket with the 2 twins crawling around her. Lily is trying to reach a wooden rattle that Clara gently moves, while Violet curiously explores the colorful embroidery on the blanket. The babies are not only calm, they are happy. Clara, Arthur says with obvious pride, I present to you Dr. Eleanor Vance, the girl's psychologist. Clara gets up gracefully without disturbing the twins' game. Dr. Vance, nice to meet you. I've heard you have been helping the babies. Eleanor studies Clara with clinical eyes. She is young, clearly of Highland origin. She wears simple clothes, but there is something in her eyes that makes her uneasy, a serene confidence that is not based on academic degrees or social status, but on something deeper. Nice to meet you, Clara. Arthur tells me that you have experience with difficult babies. I wouldn't say that Lily and Violet are difficult, Clara replies. They were just trying to communicate something important. And what was that? Eleanor asked with a tone bordering on condescending. That they needed to feel connected with their family, with their home, with the memory of their mother. Eleanor feels a twinge of irritation. This woman without formal education is oversimplifying what she has diagnosed as a complex postnatal adjustment disorder with components of inherited anxiety. It's an interesting perspective, says Eleanor, but as a clinical psychologist, I must point out that 4-month-old babies do not have the cognitive ability to process abstract concepts, such as the memory of deceased people. Clara smiles softly. With respect, doctor, I think we underestimate what babies can feel. They perceive energies and emotions in ways that we don't fully understand. Energies. Eleanor can't help her tone becoming sharper. Clara, I hope you're not introducing practices of, unscientific alternative medicine into the care of these girls. Arthur intervenes, feeling the tension. Eleanor, it doesn't matter how we explain it. What matters is that it works. Arthur, says Eleanor, turning to him with a serious expression. As a mental health professional, I have a responsibility to protect the well-being of my patients. I cannot endorse methods that have no scientific basis. Scientific basis? Clara asked gently. Is it scientifically based to keep 2 babies on treatment for 3 months without results? The silence that follows is tense. Eleanor feels as if she has received a slap. This maid has just implicitly questioned her professional competence. Clara, Eleanor says in a controlled voice, I understand that you have good intentions, but child psychological treatment requires years of study and clinical experience. It's not something that can be improvised with folklore. I'm not improvising anything, Clara replies with the same calmness. I come from a family that has taken care of children for generations. What I know has been passed down from mother to daughter for hundreds of years. Tradition is not equivalent to efficiency, Eleanor replies. At that moment, Violet begins to get restless. Clara immediately sits up and takes the baby in her arms, starting to gently hum the same ancient melody that Arthur had heard the day before. Violet calms down immediately, snuggling up against Clara. Eleanor observes this with a mixture of scientific fascination and deep jealousy. As a psychologist, she recognizes that she is witnessing a genuine connection between caregiver and baby. But as a woman in love with Arthur, she sees Clara as a direct threat to her plan. Well, says Eleanor finally, I guess we can monitor this new approach, but I insist on keeping my regular sessions to ensure the girl's proper psychological development. Of course, says Arthur. Clara, is it okay for you to work in coordination with Dr. Vance? Clara looks directly into Eleanor's eyes. For a moment, the two women evaluate each other. Clara sees ambition disguised as professional concern. Eleanor sees an unexpected threat to everything she has built. It seems perfect to me, says Clara finally. It's always good to have different perspectives to help the girls. Excellent, Eleanor says with a smile that doesn't reach her eyes. So let's schedule a session for tomorrow. I want to take a closer look at how you interact with the babies, Clara, for educational purposes. After Eleanor leaves, Mrs. Higgins finds Clara in the kitchen preparing lunch. My child, she tells her quietly, be careful with that doctor. Why do you say that, Mrs. Higgins? I've been in this house for 15 years. I know how to recognize when someone is jealous. And that woman is not worried about the girls. She is worried about losing the master. Clara absorbs this information in silence. She had sensed something strange in Eleanor's energy, something that had nothing to do with medical concern. Do you think she'll try to make trouble for me? I'm sure of it, replies Mrs. Higgins, but you have something that she's never going to have. What's that? A real gift, and the truth always comes out. What neither of them knows is that Eleanor is already in her car talking on the phone with a contact in social services. Yes, I want to report a worrying situation, Eleanor says in a professional voice. An untrained housekeeper is practicing what appears to be unauthorized traditional medicine on 4-month-old babies. I need them to look into whether she has the appropriate childcare permits. The game has started and Eleanor Vance has no intention of losing the initial manipulation. Saturday, 2:15 p.m. Eleanor Vance returns to the Sterling mansion with a perfectly rehearsed smile and a leather briefcase that contains more than just psychological evaluation instruments. She has spent the whole night investigating Clara Thorne and developing a strategy to discredit her without appearing obviously malicious. Arthur, she says as she enters the study where she finds him reviewing some contracts. I hope you don't mind that I came unannounced. I was thinking all night about the situation of the girls. Not at all, Eleanor. In fact, I wanted to thank you for being so open with Clara yesterday. I know it must be difficult for you as a professional. Eleanor sits on the chair in front of the desk, crossing her legs elegantly. That's exactly what I wanted to talk to you about. I did some research on traditional childcare practices in rural communities of the Scottish Highlands. Arthur looks up from his documents, intrigued. And what did you find? It's fascinating from an anthropological perspective, Eleanor says, opening her briefcase and pulling out a folder, but also worrying from the point of view of modern child development. Eleanor spreads several printed articles on the desk. These are real academic papers on childcare practices in isolated communities, but she has carefully selected only those that mention negative or risky aspects. Look at this, she says, pointing to a paragraph marked with yellow highlighter. This study from the University of Edinburgh mentions cases where certain herbs used in infant healing rituals can cause severe allergic reactions in babies. Arthur reads the paragraph, frowning. But Clara hasn't used herbs, she just sings to them. True, but here's the worrying point. Eleanor turns to another page. This other study talks about how some traditional melodies can induce trance states in young children. The researchers found altered brainwave patterns that could affect normal neurological development. Eleanor is partially lying. The studies are real, but they are taken out of context and refer to completely different ceremonial rituals. Not to lullabies, but she presents the information in a way that seems directly relevant to Clara's case. I don't understand, Arthur says, feeling confused. The girls seem better than ever. And that's the most subtle problem, Eleanor replies, adopting the tone of a university professor who knows it works well with men like Arthur. Sometimes the negative effects of these practices do not manifest themselves immediately. They may appear as cognitive or emotional developmental problems months later. Eleanor takes out a tablet and opens a video. Let me show you something I found last night. The video shows a healer in a remote region performing a ritual of cleansing a child. The child seems to enter a kind of altered state of consciousness. Do you see how the child becomes completely passive? The anthropologist who documented this later discovered that these children showed signs of psychological dependence towards the healer. They couldn't calm down without the presence of that specific person. Arthur feels a growing alarm. Are you saying that the girls could become dependent on Clara? It's a possibility we can't ignore, Eleanor says, closing the tablet. As a psychologist, my duty is to make sure that Lily and Violet develop healthy emotional self-regulation mechanisms, not dependencies towards specific external stimuli. At that moment, childish laughter is heard from the upper floor. It's the twins playing with Clara. They sound happy, says Arthur. Yes, but what will happen when Clara is gone? When they grow up and need to learn to manage stress on their own? And if all this calm is artificial? Eleanor can see that her words are getting through. Arthur is an intelligent man, but not a specialist in child development. Like any concerned parent, he is willing to consider anything that can protect his daughters from future harm. What do you suggest? Asks Arthur. Careful monitoring, regular evaluations to ensure that the girls' development remains within normal parameters, and perhaps gradually reduce their dependence on Clara's methods. Reduce how? Eleanor had expected this question. Could we implement scheduled periods where Clara does not interact with the babies to assess if they can remain calm without her presence? If they're really healing, they should be able to. It's a perfect trap. Eleanor knows that any baby will get restless if his main caregiver is suddenly removed from him, especially after months of trauma. When Clara is not present and the girls become restless again, she will be able to point to this as evidence of problematic dependence. It sounds reasonable, Arthur says slowly. I also think we should document everything. Video recordings of Clara's interactions with the babies so we can analyze them objectively. Don't you think that's a little invasive? Eleanor adopts a professional expression of concern. Arthur, I understand your discomfort, but we are talking about the long-term well-being of your daughters. If Clara really has beneficial methods, the documentation will prove it. If there is something problematic, we need to identify it before it causes harm. While they are talking, Clara comes down the stairs carrying Violet, who has fallen asleep in her arms. He sees her differently from the day before. There is something in her posture that suggests uneasiness. Excuse me, Mr. Sterling, Clara says softly. Could I talk to you for a moment? Of course, Clara. Dr. Vance and I were just talking about the progress of the girls. Clara looks at Eleanor, who returns a kind but cold smile. Sir, I got a strange call this morning, Clara Thorne says. Someone from the government asking about my childcare certifications. Eleanor fakes surprise. From the government? What kind of certifications? They said they need to verify that I have official permits to work with minors. But I've never needed those papers before. I have always taken care of children in my village without problems. Arthur looks at Eleanor. Is this kind of verification normal? Well, Eleanor says carefully, with the new regulations on child protection, they may have tightened the requirements for people working with babies, especially in cases where unconventional methods are used. Clara feels that something is not right. Unconventional methods. Clara, Eleanor says with a condescending tone, singing in indigenous languages and using traditional healing techniques. It could be classified as alternative medicine, and working with minors using alternative medicine requires special certifications. But I don't practice medicine. I just sing songs that my grandmother taught me. I understand your perspective, Eleanor replies, but the authorities may see it differently. Any intervention that alters the emotional or physical state of a minor can be considered a medical practice. Arthur feels the growing tension between the two women. Is there a real legal problem here, Eleanor? Probably not, if Clara gets the appropriate certifications, but until then, Eleanor intentionally leaves the sentence unfinished. Until what? Clara asks. Well, technically, you could be violating regulations on unlicensed childcare. If someone wanted to cause trouble, the message is clear. Clara could get into legal trouble, and the person most likely to cause trouble is sitting in front of them with a professional smile. What do I need to do to get those certifications? Clara asks. Eleanor checks her phone. Let me make some calls. I know people in the Ministry of Health, but the process can take weeks, maybe months. And in the meantime, Eleanor says, maybe we should be more careful. Closer supervision, documentation of all the methods used, that kind of thing. Clara understands that she is being maneuvered into a defensive position. Eleanor's every word sounds reasonable on the surface, but the underlying message is clear. Now Clara is under suspicion and must prove her innocence. I understand, says Clara finally. I will do whatever it takes to keep taking care of the girls. Perfect, Eleanor says, with barely disguised satisfaction. Why don't we start tomorrow with some observation sessions? We will be able to objectively evaluate your methods and document everything for the authorities. After Clara leaves, Arthur remains thoughtful. Eleanor, do you think there could really be a legal problem? It is possible, Arthur, but the most important thing is to make sure that we are doing everything correctly. The last thing you'd want is for social services to get involved for unauthorized childcare. Eleanor knows exactly which buttons to press. Arthur is a successful entrepreneur precisely because he is cautious about legal risks. The mention of social services is enough to make him nervous. You are right, says Arthur. Better safe than sorry. Eleanor smiles. Her strategy is working perfectly. She has planted seeds of doubt about Clara without appearing directly hostile. Now she just needs to wait for those seeds to grow. What she doesn't know is that Mrs. Higgins overheard the whole conversation from the hallway and is starting to understand the game Eleanor is playing. Escalation of the conflict. Monday, 7:30 in the morning. Clara enters the mansion with a strange feeling in her chest. Over the weekend, while she was at her house in the Cotswolds, she could not get the Saturday conversation out of her mind. Something in Dr. Vance's eyes reminded her of the women of her village who practice envy. They smile with their mouth, but their eyes exude poison. Good morning, my child. Mrs. Higgins greets her in the kitchen, but her tone is more serious than usual. We need to talk before you go upstairs with the girls. Clara sits at the wooden table while Mrs. Higgins serves her Earl Grey tea. The familiar scent calms her down a little. Mrs. Higgins, did something bad happen over the weekend? Not exactly bad, but worrisome. Mrs. Higgins lowers her voice and gets closer. On Saturday afternoon after you left, I overheard a conversation between the master and Dr. Vance. They're planning to keep a very close eye on you. Keep an eye on me? Why? That woman is putting weird ideas in Mr. Sterling's head. She says that your methods could be dangerous, that the girls are becoming dependent on you. Clara feels a chill in her stomach. But the babies are better than ever. Doesn't Mr. Sterling see the difference? He does see it, but she is very cunning. She does not directly say that you are bad. She talks about scientific studies, government regulations, future risks. She sounds very professional, and Mr. Sterling believes her. He's confused, child. On the one hand, he sees that his daughters are happy, but on the other hand, a doctor with a university degree is telling him that something could be wrong. At that moment, Arthur comes down the stairs. He looks better than a week ago, but Clara notices tension in his posture. Good morning, Clara. How did you spend the weekend? Well, Mr. Sterling, how were the girls? That's exactly the point, says Arthur, pouring himself tea. On Saturday night, they got a little restless. Not like before, but I noticed the difference without your presence. Clara sees the trap immediately. Sir, babies always miss their primary caregivers when they leave. It is normal and healthy for them to form bonds of attachment. Yes, but Dr. Vance says it could be indicative of a problematic dependency. Problematic dependency? Clara can't hide her disbelief. Sir, the girls have gone from crying 20 hours a day to being normal, happy babies. How can that be problematic? Arthur looks uncomfortable. Clara, no one questions that you have achieved incredible results. But Eleanor has experience in child development. She says we need to ensure that progress is sustainable. And how do you propose to do that? Well, today she's going to come and observe your interactions with the girls to document your methods and assess whether they are within normal child care parameters. Clara understands that she is being tested, but she has no choice but to agree. It's okay, sir. I have nothing to hide. When Clara goes up to the twins' room, Lily and Violet immediately light up when they see her. Lily extends her little arms so that she can carry her, while Violet crawls towards her, making cheerful sounds. Hello, my little ones, Clara whispers, taking Lily in her arms. How did you spend the weekend without your Clara? She is starting to hum softly when she hears footsteps on the stairs. Eleanor arrives promptly at 8 o'clock, carrying a professional video camera and a folder full of forms. Good morning, Clara. I hope you don't mind me recording our sessions. It is standard protocol for child care evaluations. It doesn't bother me, Clara replies, although the presence of the camera makes her nervous. Eleanor sets up the camera on a tripod, focusing it directly on Clara and the babies. Then she sits on a chair with her folder, adopting the pose of a researcher observing an experiment. Please proceed with your normal routine, Ellen. Eleanor says, turning on the camera. Act like I'm not here. But it's impossible to act naturally with a camera recording every move and Eleanor constantly taking notes. Clara tries to start her usual routine, but the babies feel the tension in the environment. Violet gets a little restless, as if she perceives that something is different. Interesting, Eleanor mutters, writing something. Violet always gets restless at first, doesn't she? Clara answers. They are usually very calm with me. So what do you attribute the difference to today? Clara looks directly at Eleanor. There's a stranger in the room recording them. Eleanor smiles coldly. Babies who have developed healthy attachment bonds should not be so upset by the presence of observers. It's another possible sign of overdependence. Clara understands that she is in an impossible situation. Everything she does will be interpreted negatively. If the babies are calm, she will say that it is dependence. If they are restless, she will say that it is because they cannot function with observers. Stavancic, Clara says calmly, may I ask you something? Of course. In your 3 months of treating the girls, did you manage to stop the crying ever? Eleanor tenses. Child psychological treatment is a gradual and complex process. It is not about immediate results, but about long-term healthy development. I understand, but in practical terms, did it help them? My work focuses on aspects that are not immediately visible. Cognitive development, sleep patterns, appropriate emotional responses. And did any of those aspects improve during your treatment? Eleanor realizes that Clara is putting her in a defensive position. Clara, I'm not here for you to evaluate my work. I'm here to evaluate yours. You're right. Excuse me. Clara takes Violet, who immediately calms down in her arms. I just wanted to understand your professional perspective better. For the next hour, Eleanor meticulously documents every interaction. When Clara sings in Scottish Gaelic, Eleanor writes, using unidentified languages, possible induction of altered states of consciousness. When babies calm down immediately upon hearing Clara's voice, she notes, excessive conditioned response, indicative of problematic dependence. At the end of the session, Eleanor reviews her notes with a serious expression. Clara, I have some preliminary concerns that I need to discuss with Arthur. What kind of worries? I prefer to talk to the father first, but I can tell you ahead of time that I see some patterns that could be problematic for the girl's independent development. After Eleanor leaves, Clara stays in the room with the twins, who are now completely calm and playing normally. Don't worry, little ones, she whispers to them. Clara is not going to let anyone hurt you. But in the study below, Eleanor is planting deeper seeds of doubt in Arthur's mind. The baby's responses to Clara are too intense, she tells him, showing the video on her laptop. Look here, when she enters the room, the reaction is almost desperate, as if they can't function without her. But isn't it normal for babies to get excited when they see their caregiver? To some extent, yes, but this exceeds the normal parameters. And there is something more worrying. Eleanor pauses the video at a moment where Clara is singing and the babies are watching her with total attention. Do you see this expression on their faces? This is what psychologists call a mild trance state. They are not simply listening to music. They are in an altered state of consciousness. Arthur studies the faces of his daughters on the screen. To him, they look calm and attentive. But Eleanor speaks with such authority that he begins to doubt his own perception. Is that bad? Potentially, yes. Babies who are regularly exposed to trance states may develop difficulties regulating their emotions without those specific stimuli. In simple terms, they can become addicted to the experience. Addicted, not to a substance, but to a particular mental state. And if Clara is unavailable one day, Eleanor leaves the sentence unfinished, allowing Arthur to imagine the implications. What do you recommend? Gradual reduction of exposure, scheduled periods where Clara does not interact with the babies to evaluate if they can maintain independent emotional stability. And if they can't, then we will have confirmation that a problematic dependency has developed that needs to be corrected before it becomes permanent. It's another perfect trap. Eleanor knows that any change in the established routine will cause some level of stress in the babies that she may interpret as evidence of pathological dependence. Let's start tomorrow, Arthur finally says, but I want to be careful. I don't want to traumatize the girls. Of course, we will be very gradual. Maybe start with an hour in the morning where Clara stays out of it. That night, Clara receives an unexpected call at her house. It's Mrs. Higgins. My child, be very careful tomorrow. That doctor convinced the master to do tests with you. They're going to separate you from the girls for periods to see if they get sick. Clara feels her heart racing. And if they get bad, then she's going to say it's your fault for creating dependence. Clara stays silent, processing the complexity of the situation. She is being manipulated into a position where any outcome will be used against her. Mrs. Higgins, do you think that Mr. Sterling really doubts me? He's confused, child. That woman is very smart. She knows exactly how to talk to sound reasonable while planting poison. That night, Clara can't sleep. She knows that the most difficult part of her test will begin tomorrow. And for the first time since she arrived at the mansion, she is not sure if she can protect the babies from the woman who is supposedly helping them. Clara is fired. Tuesday, 8 a.m. Clara arrives at the mansion with an upset stomach. She has spent a sleepless night praying to the spirits of her village and asking for wisdom from her deceased great-grandmother. She knows that today she will be tested in the most cruel way. She will be separated from the babies to assess their dependence. My child, says Mrs. Higgins in a low voice over tea, try to stay calm no matter what happens. That woman is looking for any excuse to attack you. I know, Mrs. Higgins, but I'm more worried about what might happen to the girls. At 8:30, Eleanor arrives with a smile that does not reach her eyes, and Arthur accompanies her to the twins' room. Clara is already there playing quietly with Lily and Violet, who are in a perfect mood. Good morning, Clara, Eleanor says, installing her camera again. Today we are going to implement the first phase of the Emotional Independence Assessment Protocol. What exactly does it consist of? Clara asks, although she already knows the answer. You're going to be out of the room for an hour. I'm going to observe how the babies react to your absence and document their stress levels. Clara looks at Arthur. Sir, are you sure this is necessary? The girls are perfectly fine. Arthur avoids her gaze. It's only for an hour. If they are really healthy, they will be able to handle it. This is the first time Arthur has spoken to Clara in a cold and distant tone. Eleanor has managed to create enough doubt in his mind that he now sees Clara as a possible threat instead of a savior. It's okay, Clara says, gently kissing the forehead of each twin. I'll be back soon, my little ones. Clara leaves the room but stays in the hallway where she can hear everything that's going on. Initially, the babies continue to play normally, but after 15 minutes, when they realize that Clara does not return, Violet begins to make searching noises. Interesting, Eleanor murmurs, talking to the camera. Subject 2 shows early signs of separation anxiety. Violet is not crying, she is just looking with her eyes and making soft sounds, completely normal behavior in babies of her age. But Eleanor documents it as evidence of problematic dependence. After 30 minutes, Lily also starts to get restless. She's not crying desperately like she used to, but she clearly misses Clara. Both subjects now show separation stress, Eleanor says for the recording. Agitation levels are progressively increasing. By 45 minutes, the babies are genuinely upset. It's not the traumatic crying from before, but they are clearly uncomfortable and looking for their primary caregiver. That's enough, Clara says from the hallway, not being able to take any more. No, Eleanor stops her firmly. 15 minutes to go, we need to document the full progression. They are being tortured unnecessarily, Clara protests. We are scientifically evaluating their capacity for emotional self-regulation, Eleanor replies with clinical coolness. When the hour finally ends, Clara rushes into the room. The twins immediately calm down when they see her, extending their arms and making sounds of relief. Do you see that? Eleanor says to Arthur. The response is immediate and excessive. This is not the normal behavior of emotionally independent babies. Dr. Vance, Clara says in a voice trembling with contained rage. Any baby in the world would be like that if the person they know the most suddenly disappeared. It's basic child psychology. Clara, please don't interrupt my professional assessment, Eleanor replies condescendingly. What we have just documented confirms my suspicions about pathological dependence. Arthur watches the interaction with increasing discomfort. On the one hand, he sees that his daughters are clearly better off with Clara. On the other hand, Eleanor speaks with such academic authority that he feels incompetent to question her diagnosis. What exactly does this mean? Asks Arthur. It means that Clara has created an artificial dependence in the babies towards her specific presence. This is going to interfere with their long-term healthy emotional development. And what is the solution? Eleanor had been waiting for this question. Gradual weaning. We need to break the dependency before it becomes permanent. Weaning? Gradually reduce the exposure of babies to the specific stimuli that Clara uses. Her presence, her songs, her particular methods of calming down. Clara feels like she's been stabbed. They are proposing to separate me from the girls completely. Not immediately, Eleanor says with false consideration, but gradually for their own good. For whose sake? Clara explodes. Of the babies who were suffering for months until I arrived, or for the sake of your plan to control this family? The silence that follows is tense. Clara has just openly accused Eleanor of having hidden motivations. Clara, Arthur says in a warning voice, I think you're out of line. Out of line, Clara turns to him. Mr. Sterling, 2 weeks ago your daughters were crying 20 hours a day. You were considering putting them in a mental institution. They are normal and happy babies now, and I'm out of line for asking why anyone would want to change that. Eleanor intervenes with a calm but firm voice. Clara, I understand that you feel attacked, but my only interest is the long-term well-being of these babies. Your emotionality is clouding your judgment. My emotion or your envy? Envy? Eleanor laughs scornfully. What exactly would I be jealous of? Clara looks her straight in the eyes. From the fact that in 1 week I achieved what you could not do in 3 months. The tension in the room is palpable. Arthur finds himself completely lost between two women who clearly see each other as enemies. Enough is enough, says Arthur finally. Clara, I need you to calm down. Mr. Sterling, Clara says, taking Violet in her arms, I'm just asking you to use your common sense. Look at your daughters. Do they look traumatized? Do they look unhealthy? Or do they look exactly like normal babies should look? Arthur looks at his twins. They are perfectly calm in Clara's arms, smiling and making cheerful sounds. It's impossible to deny that they look like completely healthy babies, but Eleanor has an answer for that too. Arthur, the negative effects of pathological emotional dependence do not manifest themselves immediately. They appear as developmental problems later on, difficulties in forming healthy relationships, chronic anxiety, inability to handle stress independently. And you can predict that with certainty, Clara asks, based on decades of scientific research in child development. Yes. And based on generations of ancient wisdom about childcare, I can't give an opinion? Tradition is not equivalent to science, Eleanor answers dryly. And science without results is equivalent to what? Eleanor turns red with rage but maintains her professional composure. Clara, I think this conversation shows that you do not have the necessary emotional preparation to work in an environment that requires clinical objectivity. Clinical environment? Clara looks around the room full of children's toys and decorations. This is a home, not a laboratory. Exactly my point, says Eleanor triumphantly. You're confusing your role. You're not the mother of these babies. You're a temporary employee. Words cut deep. Clara feels tears burning in her eyes but refuses to cry in front of Eleanor. You're right, Clara finally says, gently putting Violet in her crib. I'm not their mother, but I was the first person in 4 months who really listened to them. Clara, Arthur says, his voice softening a little. No, Mr. Sterling, I understand. You prefer to rely on university degrees than on real results. Clara's heading towards the door. Just remember this. Your daughters were suffering when I arrived, and they're going to suffer again when I leave. No one says you have to leave, Arthur says quickly. No. Clara turns to Eleanor. Doctor, what is your professional recommendation about my continuation in this job? Eleanor smiles. She has been waiting for this moment. Given what we have observed today and considering the lack of cooperation with standard assessment protocols, I would recommend a gradual transition to caregivers with formal training in child development. In other words, to say goodbye. In other words, prioritize the well-being of babies over short-term conveniences. Clara approaches the cribs and gently kisses each twin. Goodbye, my little ones. Clara will miss you very much. While Clara is collecting her few belongings, Mrs. Higgins appears at the door with tears in her eyes. My child, this is wrong, very wrong. I know, Mrs. Higgins, but that woman has more power than me. What are you going to do? Clara looks for the last time towards the room where the twins are playing, oblivious to the drama unfolding around them. I'm going to pray for God to protect those babies, because something tells me they're going to need it. An hour later, Clara is on the bus back to the Cotswolds with a broken heart, but a clear conscience. She has done everything possible to protect the twins, but the forces against her were too powerful. What she doesn't know is that Eleanor is already on the phone with an elite nanny agency looking for a replacement who is completely malleable to her instructions. I need someone who follows strict protocols without asking questions, Eleanor says. Someone who understands that psychological treatment requires discipline, not sentimentality. In her private office, Eleanor smiles with satisfaction. She has successfully eliminated the biggest threat to her plan. Now she can proceed to the next phase. Position herself as the only person capable of repairing the damage that Clara allegedly caused. Crisis of babies. Wednesday, 3:47 in the morning. The desperate scream that crosses the Sterling mansion is like an echo of the past that Arthur had hoped to never hear again. Lily and Violet had been crying continuously for 6 hours. It's the same traumatic crying as before, as if the last 2 months of peace had never existed. Arthur walks down the main aisle in boxers and a t-shirt, his hair tousled, his eyes bloodshot. In less than 24 hours without Clara, his daughters have returned to the state of anguish that almost drove him crazy before. Mr. Sterling, sighing, Mrs. Higgins tells him, appearing on the stairs in a wrinkled robe. Her eyes are red, not only from exhaustion, but from pent-up rage. The girls don't stop. The new nanny can't take it anymore. The new nanny is Monica Sandoval, a 45-year-old woman with impeccable credentials recommended by Eleanor. She earns £35,000 sterling a week and has a resume that includes having taken care of the children of ambassadors and ministers. She arrived yesterday afternoon with 2 suitcases of specialized techniques in the confidence of someone who has never failed with a baby. Now she is sitting in the twins' room, completely defeated, with Violet in her arms, who is crying so hard that her voice no longer comes out. Mr. Sterling, Monica says when Arthur enters the room, in 25 years of experience, I have never seen anything like this. It's like these babies are possessed. The word possessed hits Arthur like a punch. That's exactly what he had thought before Clara arrived. Have you tried all the techniques you know? All of them. European relaxation techniques, American calming methods. I even tried some techniques that I learned in Switzerland. Nothing works. It's like they're crying about something very specific that I can't give them. Lily is in her crib, crying with an intensity that makes her whole little body tremble. Her golden curls are soaked with sweat. Little face is swollen from constant exertion. I need to call Eleanor, Arthur says, taking his phone. At 4:15 in the morning, Eleanor arrives at the mansion. She comes perfectly arranged despite the time, as if she had been waiting for this call. Arthur, I know this is hard, but it's exactly what I predicted, she says in a sympathetic voice, but with a satisfied twinkle in her eye. You predicted this? Of course, it's emotional withdrawal syndrome. The babies got so used to Clara's specific stimuli that now they can't function without them. Withdrawal syndrome? Eleanor takes out her tape recorder and starts documenting. It is like when an addict stops receiving the substance to which he is dependent. The body and the mind go into crisis. But they are babies, Eleanor. They are not addicts. Arthur, emotional dependence works the same way as chemical dependence. Clara created an artificial need in the girl's nervous system. Monica listens to this explanation with increasing discomfort. Doctor, with respect, I have never heard of emotional withdrawal syndrome in babies. Eleanor looks at her condescendingly. Monica, right? It is an advanced concept in developmental psychology. It is not taught in basic childcare courses. The humiliation is clear. Monica has been reduced to basic course by a woman who has never spent a full night taking care of babies. And how long does this last? Asks Arthur, watching his daughter suffer. It depends on how deep the dependency Clara created is. We could be talking about days, maybe weeks. Weeks? Arthur feels increasing panic. Eleanor, I can't stand weeks of this again. I know, dear, says Eleanor, putting a hand on his shoulder with false intimacy. But it's the price of reversing the damage that was done. At that moment, something extraordinary happens. Mrs. Higgins enters the room carrying the bag that Clara had forgotten the day before. As soon as the familiar smell reaches the twins, their crying changes. It doesn't stop completely, but it becomes less desperate. What's this? Eleanor asks quickly. Clara's shawl, replies Mrs. Higgins. She forgot it yesterday. Take it away immediately, orders Eleanor. You're reinforcing the dependency. But it's calming them down a little bit. Mrs. Higgins, please remove that garment. You're sabotaging the recovery process. When Mrs. Higgins removes the shawl, the twins immediately return to desperate crying. It is clear evidence that they specifically miss Clara, but Eleanor interprets it as confirmation of her theory. See, it's pathological dependence. They need to be gradually detoxified from all stimuli associated with Clara. Detoxified? Monica can't keep quiet anymore. Doctor, these babies are not sick. They are crying for someone they know and love. Monica, I understand your perspective, but you don't have the training to distinguish between healthy attachment and pathological dependence. I've been babysitting for 25 years. I know how to recognize when a baby misses his caregiver versus when he is really traumatized. Eleanor gets tense. She did not expect resistance from the nanny she had recommended herself. Are you questioning my professional diagnosis? I'm questioning whether it's normal that two babies who were perfectly fine 24 hours ago are now in total crisis. The exchange is interrupted by a particularly high-pitched scream from Violet. The baby has cried so much that now she has little red spots around her eyes from the pressure. This cannot continue, Arthur says in a broken voice. They're going to get hurt. Arthur, Eleanor says with calculated urgency, I know it's hard, but if we give in now and call Clara back, we're going to reinforce the dependency and it will be even harder to break it later. What if we don't give in? Eventually, her nervous system will adapt to function without the artificial stimuli that Clara created. Eventually when? Eleanor doesn't have a real answer because her whole theory is fabricated. Every case is different. That's when Monica makes a decision that will change everything. Mr. Sterling, with all due respect, I think you should call Clara back. Excuse me? Eleanor turns to her with poorly concealed fury. In my professional experience, when a baby is this traumatized, he needs stability and affection, not detoxification. Monica, you obviously don't understand the complexity. I understand that these babies were happy with Clara and now they are suffering without her. I don't need a college degree to see that. Eleanor realizes that she is losing control of the situation. Arthur, I need to talk to you in private. They go out into the hallway, leaving Monica with the twins who are still crying. Arthur, that woman is sabotaging the treatment, Eleanor says urgently. She is emotionally engaged and cannot see objectively. Eleanor, my daughters are suffering because they are going through a necessary recovery process. If we interrupt now, all progress is lost. What progress? It's worse than ever. The progress of freeing them from an artificial dependence that would have caused problems for them all their life. Arthur runs his hands over his face. He is exhausted, confused, and desperate. And if I call Clara just for one night so that they can calm down and then we implement your plan gradually? No, Eleanor says firmly. That would be like giving heroin to an addict who is in rehab. It would reinforce the dependence and make the process more painful. It's a completely inappropriate analogy, but it's designed to scare Arthur. Eleanor, they are my daughters, not addicts. Arthur, trust in my professional experience. I know it's hard, but it's for their long-term good. Meanwhile, in the room, Monica has taken Lily in her arms and is trying to calm her down with traditional techniques. Nothing works. The baby cries as if she is asking for help for something that only a specific person can give her. Little one, Monica whispers to her, you miss your Clara, don't you? As if she had understood, Lily opens her eyes and looks at her directly, and for a moment her crying turns into a soft moan as if she were trying to communicate something. "Mrs. Higgins?" Monica calls quietly. "Yes?" "You have Clara's number." Mrs. Higgins approaches carefully. "Wait, Toma, because these babies aren't sick. They're asking for help. The doctor said we shouldn't." "The doctor is wrong," Monica says with a conviction. "And if Mr. Sterling isn't going to call Clara, maybe someone else should." It's a risky decision that could cost her her job, but Monica has seen enough childhood suffering to know when a baby needs real help versus when he's being subjected to an experiment. "Are you sure?" asks Mrs. Higgins. Monica looks at Violet, who is crying with such despair that it is impossible to believe that this is part of a completely safe healing process. At that moment, neither Eleanor nor Arthur know that the two women who really understand childcare are about to take matters into their own hands. The night is far from over, and the twins are still crying as if their life depends on someone hearing their true message. They need Clara. Research and discovery. Thursday, 6:45 in the morning. Clara is having reheated scones for breakfast in her small cottage in the Cotswolds when she receives a call that will change everything. It's an unknown number, but the voice on the other end makes her immediately get up from the table. "Clara, this is Monica Sandoval. I am the nanny who is taking care of the twins at the Sterling Mansion." "How are the girls doing?" Clara asks, feeling her heart racing. "Bad, very bad. They've been crying nonstop for 2 days. It is as if they have returned to the state of before, but worse." Clara sits heavily on her wooden chair. "And Mr. Sterling?" "He is desperate, but Dr. Vance has him completely manipulated. She says it's emotional withdrawal syndrome and that babies need to detox from you." "Syndrome of what?" "Exactly my reaction, Clara. I have 25 years of experience taking care of children. This is not withdrawal syndrome. These babies are suffering from a traumatic separation." Clara feels a mixture of validation and anguish. "Why are you calling me? Can't they fire you?" "They can, but my conscience won't let me stay silent. Mrs. Higgins gave me your number. She says that you are the only one who can really help the girls." "And Mr. Sterling?" "That's the problem. Dr. Vance has him completely manipulated. She tells him about scientific studies, pathological dependence, long-term damage. He wants to believe that he is doing the right thing." Clara walks to the window of her small kitchen, seeing the rolling hills of the Cotswolds, which calm her when she is distressed. "Monica, do you think that doctor has an ulterior motive?" "Completely. I've worked in a lot of rich people's houses. I know how to recognize when a woman is chasing a man, and Eleanor Vance is definitely chasing Arthur Sterling." "So is this all out of jealousy?" "It's my theory. You arrived, and in 1 week you achieved what she couldn't do in 3 months. That made her look incompetent in front of the man she wants to conquer." Clara absorbs this information. "What can I do? I was forbidden to return." "We need evidence that she is lying about her theories, something that proves that there is no such thing as emotional withdrawal syndrome in babies." "How do we get that?" "Mrs. Higgins has an idea. Can you come to Knightsbridge this afternoon? Not to the mansion, but to meet at the cafe in front of Harrods." Clara looks at her reflection in the window. She looks tired, defeated, but in her eyes there is a determination that she recognizes from her great-grandmother. "I'll be there." "At what time?" "At 3, and Clara, thank you for attending. I know this must hurt you a lot." "It hurts me, but it hurts me more to know that the girls are suffering." After hanging up, Clara goes to the altar she has in her living room, where she keeps photos of her ancestors and a candle always lit. She kneels in front of the image of her great-grandmother. "Grandmother, I need your wisdom. There's a bad woman hurting 2 innocent babies, and I don't know how to stop her." As always, when she connects with her roots, Clara feels a clarity that does not come from her rational mind, but from something deeper. At 3:15 p.m., Clara arrives at the cafe in Knightsbridge. Mrs. Higgins and Monica are already sitting at a table in the back with conspiratorial expressions. "My child," Mrs. Higgins says, hugging her. "You look thin. Have you been eating?" "I'm not very hungry," blatantly Clara admits. "How are the girls doing?" "Terrible," Monica replies bluntly. "Last night Violet cried so much that she threw up. Lily has small hemorrhages in her eyes from the pressure of constant crying." Clara feels nauseous. "And Eleanor, what does she say?" that it is part of the recovery process, that we have to be strong and not give in to the emotional manipulation of babies. Emotional manipulation? Clara can't believe what she hears about 4-month-old babies. That woman is crazy, Mrs. Higgins says, lowering her voice. But crazy, dangerous. She has the master completely convinced. Monica pulls out her phone. Clara, I recorded some of the things Eleanor said without her realizing it. She starts playing an audio where Eleanor's voice is heard. Arthur, I understand that it is difficult to hear babies cry, but remember that addicts in rehab also suffer. It is temporary and necessary for their long-term well-being. Did she compare babies to addicts? Clara is constantly outraged. Monica replies, this is also serious. In the second audio, Eleanor says, if we give in now and call Clara back, we will be reinforcing the pathological dependence. It would be like giving heroin to an addict. Clara stays silent, processing the magnitude of the manipulation. There is more, says Mrs. Higgins. I heard a very interesting phone conversation yesterday. What kind of conversation? Eleanor talking to someone about speeding up the schedule because the resistance is being higher than expected. Schedule for what? She didn't say it clearly, but she mentioned something about consolidating the emotional dependence on the father. Monica and Clara exchange glances. Emotional dependence on the father. Exactly. As if she is the one who is creating dependence, but in Arthur, not in the babies. Clara begins to understand the complexity of Eleanor's plan. She is using the girl's suffering to make Arthur emotionally dependent on her as a savior. But first she had to eliminate you, Monica adds, because your success made her look incompetent. And now what? The girls are going to suffer until Arthur marries her. Mrs. Higgins leans forward. That's why we need a plan. And I have an idea. Which one? My nephew works at the Department of Psychology at King's College London, specializing in child development. I told him about the case and he wants to talk to you. For what? To confirm that there is no such thing as emotional withdrawal syndrome in 4-month-old babies, and to give us real scientific evidence that we can use against Eleanor. Clara feels a spark of hope. When can we see him? Tonight at 7 in the city, and if it helps us, what do we do with that information? Monica is smiling for the first time since this crisis started. We confront Eleanor with real evidence and give Arthur a professional second opinion that is not motivated by romantic interest. Do you think it will work? It has to work, Mrs. Higgins says, because otherwise those poor babies are going to continue suffering and the master is going to end up married to a woman who tortured her own daughters to get it. That afternoon, Clara travels by tube to the university with a folder full of notes about everything she had observed in the twins. She has documented their sleep patterns, their reactions to different stimuli, and especially the specific way they responded to their ancestral songs. Dr. James Medina, Mrs. Higgins' nephew, turns out to be a man in his 40s with a neat beard and thick-framed glasses. His office is filled with books on child development, and he has educational toys scattered everywhere. Clara, he says after listening to the whole story, what you described to me has no valid scientific basis. There is no such thing as emotional withdrawal syndrome, not in 4-month-old babies. At that age, children form attachment bonds with their primary caregivers. It is completely normal and healthy. In fact, the ability to form these bonds is indicative of normal emotional development. Clara takes notes while he talks. Abruptly separating a baby from their primary caregiver can cause stress and anxiety, but that's not withdrawal, it's separation trauma. And what should a parent do in such a situation? Gradually reintroduce the caregiver, not completely eliminate contact. What you describe is psychologically harmful to babies. Dr. Medina writes a professional letter explaining these concepts with references to current studies on child development. Clara, if I may add something personal, what you describe about your ability to connect with baby girls sounds like a genuine gift. In many cultures, we recognize that certain people have special childcare skills. It's not superstition, as Eleanor says. Not at all. Modern science is discovering that babies respond to emotional and energetic subtleties that we do not fully understand. Your ability to calm them down is not pathological. It's extraordinary. Clara leaves the university with solid scientific evidence and a plan. Now she has the tools to face Eleanor on her own turf. Real consciousness versus manipulative pseudoscience. What she doesn't know is that Eleanor is already executing the final phase of her plan. That same night, while the twins are crying inconsolably, she is suggesting to Arthur that they may need to consider temporary institutionalization to protect their neurological development. The final battle is about to begin. Final confrontation. Friday, 7:20 in the morning. Arthur Sterling is sitting in his office with a cup of tea that has gone cold without him noticing. In front of him, he has three options that Eleanor presented him the night before, each one more desperate than the last. Temporary institutionalization of the twins, child psychotropic medication, or what she called total separation shock therapy. He has not slept for more than 2 hours straight for 4 days. Lily and Violet have been crying almost nonstop, stopping only because of extreme exhaustion before restarting the cycle. Monica resigned last night, saying she could not be an accomplice to child torture, leaving him alone with Mrs. Higgins and Eleanor. "Mr. Sterling," says Mrs. Higgins, entering the office without knocking, which she never does, "you need to come and see something urgent." "Mrs. Higgins, I don't have time for—" "Sir, you need to come now. There is someone here who has important information about the girls." Arthur looks up. Mrs. Higgins has a determined expression that he had not seen before, as if she had made an irrevocable decision. When they reach the main lobby, Arthur is paralyzed. Clara is standing by the entrance, but she is not coming alone. She is accompanied by a man in a formal suit with a briefcase, and both have a presence that suggests that this is not a social visit. "Clara, what are you doing here?" "I told you that." "Mr. Sterling," Clara interrupts with a firmer voice than he had heard before. "Let me introduce you to Dr. James Medina from King's College London, specialist in child development. He wants to talk to you about the diagnosis your daughters have been given." Dr. Medina steps forward and extends his hand. "Mr. Sterling, I have come because I have serious concerns about the treatment your babies are receiving." Arthur looks towards the stairs. "Doctor, I appreciate your concern, but I already have a psychologist treating the case." "Yes, and that's exactly what I want to talk about. Could we sit down for a moment?" At that moment, Eleanor appears on the stairs. Upon seeing Clara and the unknown doctor, her expression immediately hardens. "Arthur, what's going on here?" "Eleanor, this is Dr. Medina. Apparently he has some observations about the girl's case." Eleanor comes down the stairs with the confidence of one who is used to mastering any academic situation. "Dr. Medina, I'm Dr. Eleanor Vance, clinical psychologist in charge of this case. I don't understand why a second opinion would be necessary without my professional authorization." "Dr. Vance," Dr. Medina replies with formal courtesy, "I have come because I have been consulted about a diagnosis that I do not recognize in the current scientific literature. Emotional withdrawal syndrome in 4-month-old babies." The silence that follows is tense. Eleanor immediately realizes that she is being challenged on her own turf. "Doctor, I understand that some advanced terminologies may not be familiar to all professionals." "Dr. Vance, I have published extensively on child development. I have reviewed the most recent international literature. There is no such syndrome in babies of this age." Arthur looks between the two professionals like a spectator of an intellectual tennis match. "Dr. Medina," Eleanor says with a condescending smile, "could I see your credentials, please?" The doctor takes a folder out of his briefcase. "Of course, here are my publications from the last 5 years, all in peer-reviewed journals on developmental psychology." Eleanor looks through the documents, her confidence starting to waver. These are impressive credentials from a prestigious university. "And have you personally examined the babies?" Eleanor asks, trying to make up ground. "No, but I have carefully reviewed the reports Clara provided me and consulted with colleagues specializing in childhood trauma." "Clara provided him with reports?" Eleanor turns to Arthur with indignation. "An untrained maid is discussing medical cases with outside professionals. Clara has the right to seek counseling when she believes an injustice is being committed," Dr. Medina calmly replies. "Injustice? Doctor, are you being manipulated by a woman who created pathological dependence in 2 babies and now does not want to accept responsibility?" "Dr. Vance, could you show me the specific studies on which you base that diagnosis?" Eleanor gets tense. "Doctor, I have 15 years of clinical experience." I'm not asking you about your experience. I'm asking you about the specific scientific references for emotional withdrawal syndrome in 4-month-old babies. The studies are multiple sources that I have compiled over the years of practice. Could I quote some of them? Eleanor realizes that she is being cornered academically. She cannot cite studies that do not exist. Dr. Medina, I'm not going to allow my professional competence to be questioned based on secondhand reports from a maid. I'm not questioning your overall competence. I am questioning a specific diagnosis that has no scientific basis. At that moment, the twins' crying starts again from the upper floor. It's the same desperate scream that's been haunting the house for days. Clara immediately tenses up. Mr. Sterling, can I come up with them? No, says Eleanor firmly. Any contact will reinforce the dependence. Dr. Vance, says Dr. Medina, would you allow me to observe the interaction between Clara and the babies for evaluation purposes? Absolutely not. It would be counterproductive to the treatment. What treatment? Clara finally explodes. 4 days of constant torture. That's treatment? Clara, control your emotionality, Eleanor says condescendingly. Emotionality? These babies are suffering unnecessarily. Arthur is completely lost between the opposing voices. Enough, all of you. Eleanor, Dr. Medina, explain to me in simple terms what I should do with my daughters. Dr. Medina speaks first. Mr. Sterling, in my professional opinion, your babies are experiencing separation trauma from their primary caregiver. The solution is to gradually reintroduce Clara, not completely eliminate contact. That's completely irresponsible, Eleanor replies. It will reinforce pathological dependence. Doctor, I am still waiting for you to cite a single study that supports the existence of such a condition in 4-month-old babies. Eleanor realizes that she is losing the academic battle. Change tactics. Arthur, are you going to trust a stranger who has just arrived, or the professional who has been taking care of your family for months? It is a desperate move to appeal to personal relationship instead of scientific evidence. Eleanor, Arthur says slowly, I know you've been helping, but my daughters have been suffering for days. If there is a chance that you are wrong, I'm not wrong, says Eleanor with a note of panic in her voice. Arthur, if you allow Clara to return, you're going to regret this decision for the rest of your daughters' lives. And if I don't let her come back and they continue to suffer, then Eleanor is desperately looking for an answer. Then we consider more drastic options. What options? Hospitalization, psychotropic medication, temporary separation until their nervous system resets. Arthur turns pale. Temporary separation? As a last resort, place babies in specialized institutional care until they overcome dependence. The silence in the lobby is absolute. Arthur realizes that Eleanor is suggesting to separate him from his daughters. Dr. Vance, says Dr. Medina with professional coolness, are you recommending institutionalization for babies who were perfectly fine a week ago? Am I considering all options for their long-term well-being, including separating the babies from their father, if necessary to break patterns of toxic dependence? Arthur finally sees the situation clearly. Eleanor is willing to destroy his family to prove that she was right. Clara, Arthur says, his voice shaky but firm, come up with the girls. Arthur, Eleanor says desperately, you're making a terrible mistake. The terrible mistake, says Arthur looking directly at her, was listening to you in the first place. Clara runs towards the stairs. When she arrives at the twins' room, Lily and Violet are in their cribs crying with a desperation that breaks the soul. But the moment they see Clara, their crying immediately changes to sounds of relief and recognition. Hello, my little ones, Clara whispers, taking Lily in her arms. Clara is here. Everything's going to be okay. In 5 minutes, the twins are completely calm. In 10 minutes, they are smiling. Within 15 minutes, they are sleeping peacefully for the first time in days. From below, the silence in the house is deafening after days of constant crying. Eleanor is standing in the lobby, watching her entire carefully constructed plan fall apart. Arthur finally says, this is not over. I am going to report this situation to the appropriate authorities. Dr. Vance, says Dr. Medina, I suggest you reconsider that threat. I have complete documentation of this case, which includes your questionable methods. Eleanor realizes that she has lost. Her plan has been exposed. Her professional competence got questioned, and her last letter of legal intimidation has been neutralized. "This is a mistake that you will regret," she says, taking her briefcase and heading towards the door. "The only thing I regret," says Arthur, "is that it took me so long to realize what was really happening." Eleanor leaves the mansion, but everyone knows that although the immediate battle is over, the consequences of this confrontation are just beginning. Resolution and a new beginning. 3 months later, the Sterling Mansion's garden is decorated with pastel-colored balloons and a table full of small cakes. It's Lily and Violet's first birthday, and for the first time in a year, it's a genuine celebration and not a crisis meeting. Clara is sitting on a blanket spread out on the grass, watching the twins crawl and explore with the natural curiosity of 12-month-old babies. Lily tries to stand up, holding on to a small chair, while Violet chases a butterfly that perches near the flowers. "Just look," Arthur says, sitting down next to Clara with 2 glasses of fresh water. "It seems like forever ago when I thought I needed a miracle to save my daughters." "The miracle," Clara replies, "was to believe in them from the beginning." The last 3 months have brought profound changes to the Sterling family. After the confrontation with Eleanor, Arthur not only reinstated Clara as the main caregiver, but offered her something she had never expected: to officially adopt her as part of the family. Arthur had told her a week after the confrontation, "I want to offer you more than just a job. I want to offer you a home." The process was not immediate. Clara needed time to process the trauma of being separated from the babies, and Arthur needed time to understand how he had been manipulated so easily. "Mr. Sterling," Clara says now, seeing Lily take her first courageous steps, "sometimes I regret having trusted Dr. Vance." Arthur considers the question while watching his daughters. "I regret that I doubted my paternal instinct. I knew they were better off with you, but I allowed someone else to convince me to ignore the evidence of my own eyes." "It wasn't your fault. She was very convincing." "Yeah, but you were convincing too. The difference is that you showed real results while she only offered complicated theories." Eleanor had tried to make good on her threat to report the situation to the authorities, but her credibility plummeted when Dr. Medina submitted a detailed report questioning her methods. An investigation by the medical board concluded that Eleanor had applied experimental treatments without a solid scientific basis, and her professional license was temporarily suspended. "Do you know anything about her?" Clara asks. "She moved to Manchester. Apparently she is working in private practice with adults now, not with children." Clara feels a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief because Eleanor can no longer hurt other families, as she almost destroyed this one. Sadness because a woman with education and privilege chose to use her power to manipulate instead of heal. "Auntie Clara," says a small voice. Clara turns around and sees Violet standing next to her, holding a flower that she plucked from the garden. This is the first time the baby has said something similar to you. To Clara clearly. "Did you bring me a small flower?" asked Clara, taking Violet in her arms. Lily, not wanting to be less, crawls quickly towards them and extends her arms so that they can also carry her. "Daddy," Lily says, looking towards Arthur. It's a perfect moment of normal family. A father, a caregiver who has become something much more important, and 2 healthy babies who have learned to trust the world again. "Clara," says Arthur, "there is something we have talked about, but that I want to make official today." Clara looks at him curiously as he pulls an envelope out of his shirt pocket. "What is this?" "Legal papers. I want to officially adopt you as the girl's legal guardian. Not just an employee, not just a caregiver, family." Clara feels tears filling her eyes. "Mr. Sterling, I didn't. You saved them when I couldn't. You understood them when no doctor could. And most importantly, you love them as if they were yours." "It's just that they do feel like mine," Clara admits. "Then do the official thing." She agrees to be a second mother. Clara looks at the twins in her arms. Lily is playing with a lock of her hair, while Violet has fallen asleep against her chest. "And are you comfortable with that?" Arthur smiles. "Clara, in these months I have seen something that I did not know was possible. You have transformed not only the girls, but this whole house. You have brought peace, genuine love, and a wisdom that I did not have. I'm not educated like you. I don't have a university degree. You have something better. You have a true heart, and have proven that love works better than any academic theory. Clara accepts the papers with trembling hands. This means that girls will grow up knowing their Highland roots. I also want them to grow up knowing all the parts of their heritage, the business one on my side and the ancestral one on yours. And you're going to let me teach them my great-grandmother's songs. I insist that you show them to her. Those songs saved them once. Maybe they'll save them other times in the future. That afternoon, while the twins take their nap after the birthday party, Clara and Arthur sit on the terrace watching the sunset over London. Clara, can I ask you a personal question? Of course. Do you miss your previous life? Your independence? Clara considers the question carefully. I miss some things. My cottage in the Cotswolds, the tranquility of the hills, the simplicity of my previous routine. Do you regret coming here? Never. These girls needed me, and I needed them. You needed them too? Clara smiles. Mr. Sterling, I lost a baby 2 years ago. I thought I was never going to be able to be a mother. Lily and Violet gave me the opportunity to love 2 girls as if they were my own. And now I know that no matter how children come into your life, what matters is the love you give them after they arrive. That night, while Clara sings the twins the same ancestral lullaby that calmed them for the first time months ago, Arthur stays at the door listening. There is nothing mysterious or exotic about the melody anymore. It is simply the sound of maternal love in its purest form. A year later, in a small ceremony in the garden of the house, Clara officially changes her surname to Sterling Thorne. The twins, now 2 years old, run around the garden speaking a mixture of English and some Gaelic words that Clara has taught them. Mama Clara, says Lily, bringing a flower to Clara in her simple white dress. Mama Clara, repeats Violet, hugging Clara's legs. For them, there was never any confusion about who their mother was. Since Clara returned after the crisis with Eleanor, the twins have naturally called her Mom. Arthur, now 35 years old, looks younger than when Clara met him. The constant stress has been replaced by the peace of a family that functions in harmony. Do you know what's the most ironic thing about this whole story? He tells Clara during the small reception. What? Eleanor was right about one thing. The girls did develop a dependency. Clara gets tense. What are you saying? They developed a dependence on true love. And that's not pathology, it's health. Clara smiles, carrying Violet, who has fallen asleep in her arms after a day full of celebration. And you, Mr. Sterling, also developed dependence. Completely dependence towards having a real family, towards peace in my home, towards knowing that my daughters are being raised by someone who genuinely loves them. And that doesn't worry you? Arthur looks at his daughters, Clara, and the life they have built together in the last 2 years. Not at all. Some dependencies are worth it. As the sun sets over London, the Sterling Thorne family gathers in the garden for dinner. The twins, now confident and happy girls, talk about their games of the day in a mixture of languages that reflects their multicultural heritage. Clara has taught Arthur some of the Highland traditions, while he has taught her about the business world. Together, they have created a family that honors both ancestral wisdom and modern life. Mama Clara, Lily says during dinner, sing us the great-grandmother's song. Clara starts humming the melody that once soothed 2 desperate babies and now lulls 2 happy little girls to sleep every night. Arthur listens and realizes that this song has become the unofficial anthem of his family, not because it has mystical powers, but because it represents something more powerful, the transmission of love from generation to generation. When the girls fall asleep that night, Clara and Arthur stay in the room for a while watching Lily and Violet sleep soundly. Do you know what Mrs. Higgins said to me today? Asks Arthur. What? That she never believed in coincidences. She says that you came into our lives exactly when you were supposed to arrive. Clara adjusts the twins' blankets. Maybe she was right. Maybe everything happens for a reason, even Eleanor. Clara considers this. Even that. Without Eleanor, you would have never fully appreciated what we had, and I would have never fought so hard to protect something I love. So there is no resentment. Resentment, no. Gratitude. Gratitude to Eleanor. Gratitude towards life for giving us the opportunity to choose love over fear, truth over manipulation, the real family over appearances. As they leave the girls' room, Clara whispers one last time the prayer she learned from her great-grandmother. May they grow strong. May they grow wise. May they grow surrounded by true love. At the Sterling Thorne mansion, the widowed millionaire's twins are no longer crying nonstop. Instead, they fill the house with laughter, words in two languages, and the music of a family that found its harmony through the healing power of unconditional love. And every night, Clara whispers to them the ancestral songs that once saved their lives, knowing that someday, when they become mothers, they will pass those same melodies to their own children, continuing the eternal cycle of maternal love that transcends cultures, languages, and social classes. Social bond.